Flip over a jar of America's best-selling salsa and read the very first ingredient. A lot of the time it isn't tomatoes. It's tomato concentrate or tomato puree made from water and tomato paste. Tomatoes cooked down in a factory and watered back up. And right behind it, you'll often find added sugar, a thickening gum, and a firming chemical. Nothing in that jar was ever a fresh tomato. And get this, there's no real federal standard for what gets to call itself salsa. So a company can mix water, tomato paste, sugar, and starch, stamp made with real tomatoes on the front, and sell it to you at a premium. So today we're walking through 5 salsa brands you should skip, and 3 that are actually made with real tomatoes. If you're tired of being lied to, smash subscribe. You're going to want to share this one. Here's the thing about salsa. Real salsa is the easiest thing in the world to make right. Tomatoes, onion, a chili, garlic, lime, cilantro, salt. That's how they make it in Mexico, where it comes from. Chop, stir, done. There's no reason on earth for it to contain cornstarch or xanthan gum. But chopping fresh tomatoes is expensive, and they don't last on a shelf, so the big brands start with cheap tomato paste, water it back down, and then patch up the texture and flavor with gums, firming agents, sugar, and natural flavor. And here's the part that should bother you most. There's almost nothing in these jars that has to be there. The sugar, the gums, the firming agents, the dyes, they exist to make cheap ingredients behave like good ones. Let's name names. Number 5 is the cheap one hiding in plain sight. The Great Value Salsa from Walmart. Give it a little credit, it does start with real tomatoes. Look a little further down the list though, and you hit concentrated crushed tomatoes, then added sugar, then natural flavor. That catch-all phrase that can mean almost anything. Here's the thing about that sugar. Salsa is supposed to be a vegetable. There's no sugar in a bowl of fresh pico de gallo because ripe tomatoes and onions are sweet enough on their own. When a salsa needs sugar, it's usually propping up tomatoes that weren't great to begin with. It's not the worst jar on this list, but you have no idea who made it or where those tomatoes came from. You're paying for added sugar you didn't ask for. And natural flavor is doing work the ingredients should be doing themselves. The bargain bin isn't a bargain when it's hiding sugar. Number 4 is the picante standard your family has bought for decades. Paste, made by Campbell's. Look at the very first ingredient. It's crushed tomatoes. And right inside that parenthesis, it tells on itself. Water crushed tomato concentrate. That's the base of the whole jar. Tomato paste watered back up. After that, you get distilled vinegar, dehydrated onions, salt, and natural flavoring. To Pace's credit, there's no added sugar and no preservatives, so it's not the chemistry experiment some of these are. But the foundation isn't tomatoes. It's reconstituted concentrate dressed up to look like a fresh, chunky salsa. What makes this particularly telling is the dehydrated onion. Real salsa uses a real onion. When even the onion shows up as a powder rehydrated in the factory, you're eating an assembly job, not a salsa. It tastes like the idea of salsa mixed in a tank. Number 3 wraps itself in 100 years of flavor. La Victoria. Sounds authentic. Look at the ingredient list. After the tomatoes, you'll find tomato puree made from tomato paste and water, and then the tell, xanthan gum, modified food starch, and calcium chloride. Here's what all that does. Xanthan gum and modified food starch are thickeners. They fake the body of a salsa that's been simmered down from real produce. Calcium chloride is a firming agent that keeps factory processed vegetable bits from going to mush in the jar. Real salsa gets its texture from actual chopped tomatoes and onions, not a chemistry set. None of that is poison. But every one of those additives is there to imitate something real salsa does for free. You're paying for the gum and the firming agent to do the job the tomato should have done. That's 100 years of flavor, propped up by a lab. If this is already saving you from a bad shop, do me a favor and hit subscribe. We publish one of these every week. Number 2 is the one with the friendly southwestern name. Old El Paso, made by General Mills. Look at the ingredient list. The second ingredient is water, the third is tomato paste, and a few spots later comes sugar, then calcium chloride and citric acid. Read that order again. Water and tomato paste that high up means the base of this salsa is mostly watered down concentrate, not tomatoes, even though there are some diced tomatoes in there too. Then it's sweetened with sugar, firmed up with calcium chloride, and soured with citric acid and lemon juice concentrate instead of a real squeeze of lime. The real kicker is how engineered the whole thing is. Every shortcut a salsa can take, this jar takes. Concentrate for tomatoes, sugar for ripeness, citric acid for lime, calcium chloride for texture. Bottom line, it's a tomato-flavored construction project and you can taste the seams. And the worst of the bunch, number 1, is the party table giant, Tostitos, owned by Frito-Lay. The chunky salsa leans on tomato paste, added sugar, modified food starch, and natural flavors. But the real offender is the cousin sitting right next to it on the shelf, Tostitos Salsa con Queso. Look at that ingredient list because it's a doozy. The first ingredients are water, skim milk, cheese, and vegetable oil. Diced tomatoes don't show up until 6th, behind modified cornstarch. Then come maltodextrin, MSG, and artificial color, yellow 5 and yellow 6. The same dyes the EU slaps a warning label on because they may affect activity and attention in children, just not here. And Tostitos has the recalls to match. In 2019, Frito-Lay recalled Tostitos dip in salsa jars over a glass defect. And in 2023, it pulled its avocado salsa dip because the jars were mislabeled and didn't declare milk. A real danger for anyone allergic. And here's the kicker. You can make actual salsa in 5 minutes by chopping a can of fire-roasted tomatoes with onion, a jalapeno, garlic, lime, and cilantro. We'll put it in the description. When your salsa is cheese-colored cornstarch carrying a dye warning in Europe, that's not food. It's a robbing you blind science project in a festive jar. Now the good news, because real salsa, actual tomatoes in a jar, is out there. Number 3 on the real list is Green Mountain Gringo. In 1989, a Vermont couple named Christine and David Hume started hand-chopping fresh vegetables on their farm in Chester and ladling salsa into mason jars, and it caught on from there. Here's why it works. Look at the ingredient list and it reads like a cutting board. Ripe tomatoes first, then onions, tomatillos, apple cider vinegar, fresh pasilla and jalapeno peppers, cilantro, parsley, garlic, sea salt, and cumin. No added sugar, no preservatives, no gums, no firming agents. Independent reviewers rank it among the closest things to homemade you can buy in a jar. Longtime fans say it's the one they hide from guests and save for themselves. You'll find it at most grocery and natural food stores. It costs a bit more than the bargain jars, and that's because it's made of food. The label is the whole sales pitch. Number 2 is the one with the most heart behind it, Mrs. Renfro's, out of Fort Worth, Texas. In 1940, a couple named George and Arthurine Renfro started selling spices and vinegar out of their house during the tail end of the Depression. Arthurine hated her first name and preferred to be called Mrs. Renfro, and that's the name now on jars in all 50 states. The family still runs it into the 3rd and 4th generation. Here's why it works. Mrs. Renfro's is a real independent family company that built its name on gourmet salsas made without preservatives. The kind of short, honest recipe a family puts its own name on. They didn't chase the cheapest possible jar. They made flavors worth charging a fair price for. And if this ranking is useful, hit the like button. It really helps the channel cut through the algorithm. You'll find Mrs. Renfro's at most major grocers. When a family has kept the same name on the same product for over 80 years, that's a reputation they're not about to fill with cornstarch. And the best of the bunch, number 1, is Frontera from chef Rick Bayless. This is a guy who, back in 1980, moved to Mexico with his wife Deanne and drove 35,000 miles through 6 regions of the country to learn how the food was really made. Opened the acclaimed Frontera Grill in Chicago in 1987, and a decade later he bottled that knowledge as Frontera Salsas. Here's why it works. Frontera makes its salsas in small batches with real fire-roasted tomatoes and tomatillos and authentic chilies, jalapeno, habanero, guajillo, and no preservatives. This isn't a food conglomerate guessing at Mexican flavor. It's a chef who spent 40 years studying it, putting that into a jar. Longtime buyers say it's the closest thing to restaurant salsa you can get off a shelf. You'll find it at most grocery stores, and yes, it costs more than the watered-down concentrate. You're paying a chef for real roasted tomatoes instead of paying a factory for paste. That's what real salsa is supposed to be. The salsa aisle is a battle between the front of the jar and the back of the jar, between made with real tomatoes, splashed across the label, and the ingredient list that quietly says tomato concentrate, water, sugar, xanthan gum. On one side, reconstituted paste, added sugar, firming agents, and dyes the EU won't let near a kid without a warning. On the other, jars that are honestly tomatoes, onions, peppers, and lime. Sometimes from a Vermont farm, sometimes from a Fort Worth family, sometimes from a chef who drove the whole country to learn how. Remember the worst of what we saw. A salsa whose first 4 ingredients were water, milk, cheese, and oil, with tomatoes in 6th place. And remember the best, a jar whose first ingredient is exactly what it should be, ripe tomatoes. So here's the wisdom to take to the store. Turn the jar over and read ingredient number 1. If it's tomatoes, you're probably fine. If it's concentrate, puree, or paste, put it back. Real salsa starts with a real tomato. Everything else is paste in a party costume. Drop the salsa brand you still trust in the comments. We're building the list with you. Hit subscribe if this changed how you shop today. We'll see you in the next aisle.